for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 1 Episode 10 review of the Scooby Doo Show. So last time I continued my reviews of the Scooby Doo Show with a review of Season 1 Episode 9 of the Scooby Doo Show. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 1 Episode 10 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled A Frightened Hound Meets Demons Underground, which was released on November 13th, 1976. The short synopsis of the episode is, the gang investigates the weird happenings of some ancient demons. They learn that the demons are after a talisman that will drive them back into the iron lid of an underground city where they belong. So as per usual, I'll be watching Season 1 Episode 10 of the Scooby Doo Show on the Scooby Doo Dynamite Hour, the complete series DVD. This DVD has every episode of Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show, as well as every episode of Dynamite. Unfortunately, it's the only physical media release of Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show, so if you're going to want to watch Season 1 of the Scooby Doo Show on any sort of DVD or any sort of physical media, this is your only option. But as an added bonus, you do have Dynamite, so if you're also a fan of Dynamite as well, then this is the DVD for you. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I believe most fans do like this episode, or at least consider it average. It's not talked about a lot, but when it does get talked about in the Scooby-Doo community, it gets a little bit of praise. So while it's probably not a highly regarded episode and it's not considered good, it's probably at least in the middle range for people, or at least like somewhat good for them. But do I agree with the Scooby-Doo community on this? Do I think this is a really good episode? Do I think it's an average episode that's maybe decent? Or do I consider it a terrible episode and consider it one of the worst of the series? Well, let's find out, shall we? So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the Scooby Doo Show. The episode begins at a large construction site at night where we see a crane lifting an iron beam while a man assists down on the risers. Suddenly, a large puff of pink smoke appears and a giant red-winged demon appears. The man jumps onto the moving beam, and as the demon swipes at him, it leaves a handprint that is burned right through the metal. Then we cut to Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby, who are eating dinner at the Space Needle in Seattle, a famous landmark, which is really cool, and reading an article about a demon sighting on a large construction site, which has been the 5th sighting so far. The gang decides to pay the site a visit to try and solve the mystery. They talk with the owner, Mr. Crenshaw, whose office has just been vandalized by the demons. He claims they were after an ancient talisman that used to be able to drive demons back underground. Daphne finds a matchbook with the words Crow's Nest on it, and Sam Crenshaw explains that the Crow's Nest is a waterfront hotel. The gang go to the Crow's Nest Hotel and speak with the manager, Sally. Sally claims that the demons are terrorizing her as well, and a sailor named Albert Tross appears and tells the gang that the demons prowl the docks at night, and that is where the gang heads to next. On the docks, the gang decides to do their usual split-up routine, with Shaggy and Scooby ending up being chased by the demons and meet back up with the gang telling their story. Sally shows up and frantically tells Mystery Inc. that the demons have taken Albert. The gang go down to Sally's basement, which contains the entrance to the underground city. They enter the city and look around, but then get separated, with Scooby and Shaggy having a run-in with the demons again, and Fred, Daphne, and Velma find a steel lid leading underground, where supposedly the demons escaped from, but it is sealed tight. Which doesn't make sense, because why there would be 2 iron lids, one in the underground city and one up on the modern-day Seattle, doesn't make sense with the story that Crenshaw told earlier. Because because the story takes place in the past in the 1860s. This is modern day Seattle built over this old school Seattle that's from the 1860s. So why are there 2 iron lids? Why is there one on the modern day Seattle of the 1970s and one that's in the old school Seattle of the 1860s? It just doesn't make sense to me why there's 2 iron lids. Shaggy and Scooby meet up with Fred and the girls, and the five sleuths come upon a wax museum full of wax statues of classic movie monsters. And they discover a demon exhibit, and one of the demon statues are missing. Daphne gets nabbed by a demon, and the gang split up to look for her. Shaggy and Scooby enter an old music store where they find Daphne stuffed inside a piano. I like this scene. I really love the music that builds up. It's a really creepy, eerie kind of music. I do like that we get a change of pace where instead of Fred and Velma finding Daphne, which is usually the case when Daphne gets captured, this time it's actually Shaggy and Scooby who end up finding where Daphne is and find her stuffed in the piano. So I think that's cool. But yeah, I love the whole music of the scene. I think I love that music cue in the Scooby Doo show. It's a very creepy music cue. But I love the change of pace where Shaggy and Scooby get to find Daphne and untie her and save her, rather than it being Fred and Velma, which is usually the case.
Daphne? Daphne? Let's look in here. Stick close, Scooby. Anybody home? Daphne, are you here? Yipes! And like it was probably just the wind. I hope. This looks like an old music shop. What was that? Music? Music? It couldn't have been. It was probably just your imagination. Scooby, you sure got a loud imagination. Like it was only a player piano. I guess the joke's on us, eh, Scoob? Yeah. Ow, 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 ow. It's the demon. See anything? What? Me neither. Ow, ow, Zoink! It's in here with us.
Wait, it's me.
Daphne. Daphne. What are you doing in there?
That creepy demon stuffed me into this piano.
What a dirty trick. But it could have been worse. He could have stuffed you in a harmonica.
Velma and Fred find an old drugstore, and Velma discovers that one of the bottles has been recently tampered with. The bottle breaks and releases a pink gas, the same pink gas that appears when the demons show up. Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne meet up with Fred and Velma, and suddenly the demons appear and chase the gang. They drive back to the construction site to find Mr. Crenshaw's office has been destroyed, and Mr. Crenshaw is missing. After returning to the underground city, the gang managed to lose the demons that were pursuing them and stumble upon a cable car roundhouse. I really enjoy this scene. I like that Scooby out of nowhere just decides to put a trash can over himself while they're running, and it's really fucking funny. I don't know where Scooby found this trash can, why he decided that at this moment to put it on, but hey, it's funny nonetheless. And I like the scene because the gang discover the cable car system, which is a vital clue for the episode.
Scooby, be quiet. You want the demons to hear us?
Oh. Zoinks! It's a whole gang of demons. Quick, into this alley before they spot us. Scooby, come back! Scoob, you okay?
The demons appear again, and Shaggy and Scooby hop onto a cable car, and the demon chases them around the cable car. After a period of time, the cable car then crashes, and Scooby and Shaggy flee and hide in an old movie set, where they fall through a trapdoor, crashing into Velma, Daphne, and Fred, and they slam through an old wall back into the wax museum, where all the demon statues are missing. The gang then comes up with a plan. They set up some of the monster statues on the cable car rails and operate them along the rails, chasing the demon into an underground secret tunnel. They follow the tunnel and end up back in Sally's basement, where Albatross appears. Scooby also accidentally discovers a chest full of coins, revealing that Albatross is the culprit. The gang then chase him and finally trap him, and they pull off his face to reveal Sam Crenshaw underneath. His getup was Albatross, and he used him to be able to get into the underground city in Sally's basement. But when the gang found the matchbook and connected him to the crow's nest, he had to make Albatross disappear as well. The sizzling handprints and the red smoke were made using the medicine in the pharmacy, and he was stealing treasure from the underground city. He also stole demon statues from the wax museum and hooked them up to the cable cars to make it look like demons were running amok. Back at the diner, Scooby opens his meal tray and immediately hides underneath the table because he sees the smoke coming out of it and thinks the demon is back for revenge. But Fred tells Scooby that it's only a cooked lobster. And the episode ends with the gang then laughing about it, and so does Scooby. I'm going to give Season 1, Episode 10 of the Scooby Doo Show 3 stars out of 5. So yeah, this was a decent episode, quite average, you know, a little bit of a step up from the previous episode, although not by much. It's very close to that episode in terms of quality, just a little bit better. It's more so in the average and forgettable range. Like, it's not one of the worst episodes of the series, like the last episode, but it's certainly not one of the better episodes of the series and doesn't reach the heights of Headless Horseman of Halloween, or the Harem Scarum Sanitarium, or No Face Zombie chase case. Definitely not to that level of good, but nowhere near the level of bad that Mamba Wamba and the Voodoo Hoodoo is, or Fiesta Hostess and Aztec Ghost. So it's definitely in the mid-range, and it's just like, it's fine. It's decent. Not really much to say about it, because it's just, you know, it's pretty average and forgettable, you know. So it really doesn't matter which one I start with, but I'll start off with the positives of the episode first and what I like about it before I get into my negatives of the episode and what makes it such an average and forgettable episode for me. So starting with the positives, my first one is I think Fred was a good, you know, character in this episode. He created a cool trap in this episode, using the statues that they found in the museum to turn the tables on the demon. I think that was quite a cool trap. Not one of his more inventive traps, but still a pretty cool trap nonetheless. And I think Fred had a bit of leadership in this episode. He wasn't the de facto leader. He wasn't the sole leader of the episode. I think the gang as a collective group each had some form of leadership in this episode. But he did have his moments of leadership, so I'm not going to say that he didn't have them at all. But definitely wasn't the solo de facto leader of the episode. Then we have Daphne. I thought Daphne was good in this episode. She helped find one of the clues of the episode, which was great. We even got a nice damsel in distress moment from her. I know a lot of people probably wouldn't view that as good, but it's part of her character, and I don't mind it. I definitely do like that she helped find one of the clues of the episode, which was the Crow's Nest matchbook, which was a vital clue of the episode and pointed towards Crenshaw's alter ego, as well as the entrance to the underground city. Then, of course, we have Shaggy and Scooby. Shaggy and Scooby were their usual funny, cowardly selves. Quite fun and entertaining in this episode. You know, I also think it was cool that they helped find Daphne in this episode when she got kidnapped by the demon. Normally, that doesn't happen when Daphne, you know, has a damsel in distress moment and gets kidnapped by the villain. Normally, Fred and Velma are the ones to find her, so I think it was a nice bit of change of pace to have Shaggy and Scooby be the ones to discover her. But I think Scooby was definitely the stronger of the two individually wise. He was the bait of the trap in this episode, which was good. You know, he did a great job at that, obviously. But he also helped reveal the villain's identity at the end, because if you remember, when the gang think they have the demon captured, they realize that there's a underground tunnel system that the demon left you know, that has a staircase that leads back towards the Crow's Nest Hotel. When they think they got the demon captured, they realize that the demon has an underground system that he escaped in. So they follow that system, and they don't see the demon, but they instead see Albatross, who comes out of the shadows. And immediately, at first, they don't think Albatross is any sort of villain. They're talking to him like normal, because they have nothing really to suspect him on. In fact, they thought he was kidnapped for the majority of the episode, but they realized that he was okay. But Scooby, you know, was leaning on a treasure chest, and he accidentally broke, you know, his hand actually accidentally broke into the treasure chest and revealed money in it. And Tross was acting suspicious, and then the gang pieced everything together and realized that Tross was actually the demon and was the one behind it, and then they chased after him, which was an interesting change of pace to see, to see the villain not in his normal villain getup when he was captured. Having a final chase scene where the villain isn't in costume, but technically Crenshaw is. He's dressed as Albatross, but more or less, like, he's not in the demon costume being captured. Like, he's in the Tross getup, which is not far from his own getup, and gets captured, which is probably the first time the gang, just chase a normal guy that they suspect as the villain and capture him, and then they realize, and then they pull out the demon suit in the treasure chest. So by Scooby helping find that, putting his hand and accidentally into the treasure chest, and realizing that that Tross was the villain because he has that money, and he appeared out of nowhere and somehow was okay, when for a majority of the episode, or at least half of it, he was presumed to be kidnapped by the demon, as well as Crenshaw. But without Scooby discovering that, the gang would really have no proof to point towards Tross being the guy that was behind the demon getup. So Scooby helped play a vital role in, revealing the villain's true identity to the gang. Scooby was great individually, was the bait of the trap, did a great job at that. Even though it didn't work, I think Scooby was very brave for doing that, and he helped reveal who the villain behind the mask was, who was behind the mask of the demon costume. Outside of costume, I thought Sam Crenshaw was a good character. He provided backstory on the demon, his alter ego, as well as the underground city of Seattle, and he even had the talisman as like some sort of proof of the story, which, whether it was real or fake, doesn't really matter, because that showed great dedication to his scheme. And it also provided a little bit of mystery to Crenshaw, because you're like, well, how did he acquire this talisman? Was he a relative of that stranger in the story that appeared in the 1860s Seattle that, drove the demons back into the iron lid of the underground city? Or did he somehow just buy it or get it passed down by somebody else? Like, did somebody else give it to him that was maybe related to the guy? Obviously, even though the story isn't, real, and Crenshaw just used it to his advantage, it does provide a bit of mystery to him had the story been real, because it's like, well, how did Crenshaw acquire this talisman? Is he a relative of that guy in the story? Did he pay for it? Like, how did this guy in the then modern 1970s Seattle get a hold of this talisman from a guy from the 1860s Seattle? I also like that he faked his kidnapping. I think that shows great dedication to a villain. He had a lot of dedication to his scheme, despite me, not being a big fan of the motive, which I'll get onto in my negatives. I think overall he had great dedication to his scheme, and the lengths he went to was quite amazing and astonishing. I really commend him for it. It definitely reminded me of the Headless Horseman of Halloween, where it did have a bit of that downside where him faking his kidnapping kind of did make it a little bit more obvious that he could potentially be the villain. But still, I like that he went towards those lengths, and I think, he did a good job outside of costume. He provided the story, the context of his alter ego, the demon, and the underground city of Seattle, and there was mystery to him about how he acquired this talisman in the story from this man back in the 1860s Seattle. I thought there were a good number of suspects in the episode. So you had two suspects in the episode. You had Sam Crenshaw, and you had Sally. I don't really count Albatross because he's just another alter ego of Crenshaw. But whether I would count, Albatross or not, they still did a good job regardless. And they did a good job making all of them equally suspicious because, there's the mystery of how Crenshaw acquired the talisman. And then there's Tross and Sally, who act very, mysterious when, they're interacting with the gang. It's not really confirmed whether Sally's involved in the scheme, as well. and how this all went under her nose in the hotel. It's definitely something to ponder. It's not addressed, so I have to assume that Sally was not part of the scheme. And Tross, Crenshaw in the Tross getup was just able to do this under her nose, which is a bit of a stretch, but I'll go along with it. But yeah, regardless, good amount of suspects in the episode. We had 2. They at least fulfilled the bare minimum. We only had 1 demon. They did try to fool us by having, by having 3 demons, but in the end, it ended up only really being 1 demon because the other 2 or 3 were just statues that were in the wax museum of the underground city. So yeah, they did a good job in the suspect department. They at least fulfilled the bare minimum. I thought the clues were fine in this episode. I don't think they were the strongest, even though there was a good abundance of clues. They did at least showcase, how Crenshaw was able to achieve, making this monster feel real and have, some type of powers with the smoke and the burn handprint, but definitely not the strongest. The clues don't point towards don't narrow down the list of suspects, and they don't really point towards a motive, but they do explain how Crenshaw was able to achieve the effects he was doing while dressed as the demon. So, of course, you had the Crow's Nest matchbook, which, like I said before, with when Daphne found it, helped lead towards the entrance of the underground city and the hotel and Crenshaw's alter ego, Albert Tross. You had the pharmaceutical chemicals, which explained the smoke that whenever the demon would arrive, and there would be smoke before the demon, would start hissing and arrived. You had the cable car roadhouse, the system in the cable car roadhouse. When the gang realized that it was more modern 1970s technology and wasn't old school cable car type of technology. And then, of course, you had the chest of money at the end that Scooby found, which was the only real clue that helped point towards a motive. And also help reveal the villain's identity as well. So the clues, there was a good abundance of them. They at least, and also the pharmaceutical chemicals helped explain, how Crenshaw was able to achieve the burn handprint whenever the demon would, attack something and have a burn handprint. But the clues really just explain how Crenshaw, achieved the effects and lengths he would go to make the monster convincing and real. And the only really, I would say, 2 vital ones were the matchbook, which helped, point towards Tross and Sally, who were in the hotel, and the chest of money, which helped point towards the motive at the end of the episode. But it also helped point towards Tross and confirmed that he was the one behind everything. And my final positive for the episode is that I really like the setting of the episode. So the setting of the episode was Seattle, which was very unique and interesting, and we got to have a variety of settings because we got to explore different parts of Seattle. And I think the animators did a great job of making you feel like you were exploring different parts of Seattle, and I think it was cool that they chose Seattle as a setting. I've never personally been to Seattle myself, but I definitely really love the way they animated Seattle. And we hadn't seen the gang in Seattle before, so it was a really nice, new, fresh setting for the gang. We got to be at the Space Needle, which was a really cool and famous landmark. So that was cool to see. And the gang just having dinner and reading up on, the demon attacks was really awesome. There was also the construction, company where Sam Crenshaw worked and where the attacks happened. You had the Crow's Nest Hotel, which was by, the water and was the entrance to the underground city of Seattle. You had the docks, which the gang went to for a little bit, and then that was near the hotel. And then you had, of course, the underground city of Seattle, which was the main setting of the episode. I think it was cool that the gang got to go into an old city, got to explore the old underground city of Seattle. and contrast that with the new modern city of 1970s Seattle. I think it was cool that the gang got to explore those different, cities, seeing the dilapidated old 1860s Seattle and exploring all the old shops and the cable car roundhouse and all that, while also being in the modern 1970s Seattle and being at the Space Needle and the docks and the Crow's Nest Hotel that was near the water and the construction company that got attacked by the demons. So a lot of good variety in the setting, and I really think Seattle was a good choice for a setting. We hadn't seen the gang in Seattle yet, and I think the animators did a good job of making you feel like you were in Seattle and got to explore different parts of it. So really liked the choice of setting. It was definitely not something nice and fresh and something new that we hadn't seen yet, exploring different parts of a famous city. So I really enjoyed that aspect. But that's all I got for positives. So I think it's about time to get on to the negatives of the episode and what I didn't like about the episode. So starting with the negatives, my first one is that I think Velma was pretty weak in this episode. It really sucks that this is the second episode in a row where Velma wasn't particularly strong. But I mean it, like, Velma just wasn't particularly strong in this episode. Like, she didn't really piece together the clues to help solve the mystery. I didn't really get a sense that. I really wouldn't say she wasn't really much of a leader in this episode, because the gang as a collective group was more, had lots of leadership to them. And yeah, maybe Velma had a little bit of leadership moments here or there in the episode, but I don't think it was enough. I think Fred had more moments to shine as, the leader, even though it was a collective group. I think Fred had more leadership moments, and he at least had the added, bonus of creating a cool trap in the episode, whereas Velma didn't really have anything additional to her. Velma didn't really have anything going for her in this episode. She wasn't really much of a leader, besides maybe a few moments here or there. She didn't really piece together the clues to help solve the mystery. She wasn't cowardly or comedic. She didn't really... she did find one of the clues of the episode. Her and Fred together. But I just don't think she really did much in this episode. I just don't think there was enough moments for her. I know Daphne only helped find one of the clues of the episode, but I think for me, I think it was more so like a vital clue. I think Velma's one, when she found those chemicals in the pharmacy, it was kind of both her and Fred found that clue. It wasn't just exclusively Velma. But it was really just to explain one of the effects of the demons, which, is cool and all, but it's not, it doesn't make her stand out at all. There was no clues she found individually, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, her and Fred found a clue, but that was a collective, that was them as a collective, together. Whereas Velma didn't really find a clue on her own. And to me, Velma just did not have enough moments to really make her stick out in this episode and really give her much to do. So, yeah, I hate to say it, but for me personally, I found Velma to be quite weak in this episode. There were moments here or there for her, but definitely not enough for me to constitute her to be passable or good in this episode. Then we have the villain of the episode, who I thought was very boring in this episode, which was the demon. The demon I didn't really find scary or entertaining in this episode. The demon was a very boring villain. Don't get me wrong, it was very nicely animated, and the demon had a cool enough design, but I feel like for me, the demon didn't do anything that was particularly scary in my eyes or anything threatening. The closest is maybe when he would have those burning handprints, but that was only really once or twice, and it wasn't really enough for me to consider him, threatening or scary. He really didn't do anything besides hiss, and he didn't really do anything that was particularly scary or threatening in my eyes. And I don't think he was fun or entertaining to watch, because all he did was just hiss and chase after them. But he really did nothing imposing or threatening. So yeah, to me, the demon, despite having a cool design and all, I think for me, the demon just wasn't particularly scary or entertaining at all. I just found him to be quite dull and boring in my eyes. I found the motive of the episode to be quite bland and generic, not one of the better motives of the episode. In fact, the motive feels like an afterthought in this episode. It just feels like, well, we need a villain to have a motive, so yeah, give him this one. Like, the motive felt like a last-minute decision. Like, it didn't feel like it was thought out. It was very dull, very boring, bland, and generic. So essentially, the motive for Crenshaw was that he was scaring people away so that he could steal treasure from the underground city. To me, this is a basic money motive. It's bare bones, it's generic, there's nothing to it, no flavor, no uniqueness, no variety to it, just nothing that makes it stand out or interesting. The motive feels very much like an afterthought. It feels like the writers really didn't have, didn't have enough time and just were like, oh, we need to put a motive together for him. Well, let's give him this motive. It just felt like a last minute thing and an afterthought and not really something they put time into. And it just felt very bare bones and generic. Like, the motive was dull and boring, and there was no hints toward it until the end. It just was a terrible motive across, not a good motive at all. One of the weakest motives of the Scooby Doo show and the franchise as a whole. Just very bland and generic, very dull, very, lazily written, no flavor to it, no uniqueness to it. So yeah, wasn't a fan of the motive. Felt like a complete afterthought in this episode. I didn't really think there was much of a mystery in this episode. We get the backstory on the demon, so there's not really any mystique about where did this demon come from? Why is it attacking the construction, site or the construction company? So there's not really much mystique about the demon because, we know the backstory or the legend behind it. And, there's not really anything else I'm really, asking any sort of questions about. I didn't really sense any sort of mystery in this episode. There wasn't really anything that I was like, I wonder what this is. I didn't really find anything intriguing or mysterious in this episode that I wanted answered. There wasn't really much of a mystery in my eyes. It just felt more like the gang saw a series of attacks and just decided to be good Samaritans and help out. So there really wasn't much of a mystery in my eyes in this episode. The closest to a mystery was how did Crenshaw, acquire the talisman in the legend. But that mystery is more applied to how good of a character he is outside of costume, more so than the mystery of the episode itself. Mystery of the episode itself, there wasn't any. There was no mystery to be found here. And my final negative is that I found there to be no atmosphere in this episode. There was no atmosphere whatsoever. I felt no tension or suspense, no creepiness or eeriness. I wasn't fearing for the gang's safety, wasn't on the edge of my seat. Nothing that about the setting or the villain or anything else creeped me out or made me or had any sort of eeriness to it. The episode to me just had no sort of atmosphere in my mind. None of the settings provided that, and nothing the villain did provided any sort of atmosphere. So yeah, to me, there was no atmosphere to speak of in this episode. I didn't feel any sort of tension or suspense or creepiness or eeriness at all throughout the entire episode. Overall, guys, I would personally not recommend this episode to fans and newcomers to the show. I don't recommend it because I think it's a very average and forgettable episode, and it's not, it's not one of the worst episodes ever. I just personally think it's very forgettable and, one of those average episodes that, yeah, it's decent. It has some good in it, but, it also has some bad, and it's like an episode that you're like, you just forget about after you watch it. Like, you're not really that invested in it, so it's not one of the worst episodes ever, but it's not one of the better ones. And when it comes to the Scooby Doo show, I just personally wouldn't recommend it. It's just not, a good enough average episode. There are average episodes that I would consider good and at least entertaining enough that would be worth your time. I don't think this is that type of average episode. I think this is one of the weaker average episodes where it falls into closer to 2 or 1 star territory, where like if there had been more issues, it could have been way worse than it was. But it definitely falls closer to the bad than it does the good, and to me, it's just very average and forgettable. Anyways, though, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you think I'm being too harsh with it? Are there things that you see that I don't see? Do you consider it one of the best episodes of the series, or one of the better episodes of the series? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Do you consider it one of the worst episodes of the series? Do you think I didn't go hard enough? Do you think there were more issues with it that you wanted to point out? Or are you somewhere in the middle like me, where you consider it average and decent, but quite forgettable, and not, one of the worst episodes of the series, but definitely not one of the best episodes of the series either? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, obviously I'll have more Scooby Doo reviews on the way. TV show wise, movie wise, video game wise, book wise, you name it. We're going to tackle all things Scooby Doo. I'll be continuing my reviews of the Scooby Doo Show. So if you want to keep up to date with, Scooby Doo content, and want, to get involved in discussions about Scooby Doo and the various shows and movies and video games and books, then come join the channel, because we're going to talk a lot about Scooby Doo, and I want to give Scooby the recognition he deserves. And yeah, I invite any discussion. We can have differing opinions. I want to get Scooby that, recognition, and I think it'd be great to give episodes and movies and video games and books the time of day, and give pieces of Scooby Doo media that don't get enough attention some attention, and start discussion around that. So if you're interested in that and you want to see more amazing Scooby Doo content, then come join the channel and subscribe. In my next video, I'll continue my reviews of the Scooby Doo Show with a review of Season 1, Episode 11 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled A Bum Steer for Scooby. And I'm actually really looking forward to the episode a little bit. I remember having, some good memories of it, especially since it has another relative of the gangs popping up in this episode. It's going to be another relative of Daphne's, which I'm really excited about. I love seeing any relatives of the gang, so I'm really excited to see another Daphne relative. We haven't had one since Uncle John in Never Ape and Ape Man. So I'm really excited to see Daphne's next uncle, I love seeing, like I said, I love seeing relatives of the gang. So maybe that will help elevate this next episode, and we can get back on track and have a good episode. But if you want to know my thoughts on A Bum Steer for Scooby, then join me next time. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
Got it all together for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy is doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.